Voilà, donc on verra un instant.
Welcome along, everybody, to the opening round of what promises to be a fantastic season of the Formula Renault Eurocup. We are here in France, the south of France, and the wonderful Paul Ricard facility for two races this weekend. Some returning drivers, lots of rookies, and a busy grid of almost 30 drivers and cars. This is how the calendar will shape up for the 2018 season, and you'll note that the vast majority of circuits held on Grand Prix venues, including Paul Ricard, which makes a welcome return to Formula One this year. So we are here for our opening rounds. We get to Monza in Italy, Silverstone, Monaco, of course, coming up, the Red Bull Ring, some rounds in Germany. Here is the graphic of where we are in the world. We're around about an hour from Marseille, near Le Castellet. Up in the hills, this circuit built on a plateau back in 1970 originally. It was built in less than a year and has always been a high-tech facility. It's changed its guise over recent years. It has a multitude of different layouts that can be used and has proven to be a very popular test track for top teams around the world over the years, partly because of the facilities here and partly because of the mild winter weather that you get around this circuit. So Formula Renault kicking off what is going to be a fabulous year here at Paul Ricard. Lots of new drivers to talk you through and some changes as well to the format. The biggest change in terms of the format of the races is that they're going to be slightly longer this year at 30 minutes plus one lap, 5 minutes longer than the races last year. So welcome along to Paul Ricard. My name's Chris Hartley. I'm going to be talking you through the races this weekend, and I have to say the weather has been a bit of a challenge for the drivers and the teams all week long. It started the week when everybody was setting up with heavy rain for a few days, and then yesterday we had a practice session for 50 minutes which started in wet conditions. It was very heavy showers, but it was relatively mild and the track dried up very quickly here. It's been resurfaced in recent times, this circuit, so it dried up very quickly. And this morning, the wet weather was replaced with wind. It was really, really strong winds today. I was watching the qualifying session up on the building of the roof of the buildings overlooking the pitch straights, and it was incredibly cold with that biting wind, and it was a real challenge for the drivers in qualifying. Lots of them saying you could do exactly the same lines, exactly the same braking points on two different laps, and your times would be 2 or 3 tenths of a second difference, just depending on which way the wind was going and whether or not it was hindering you. It is still pretty breezy out there, but it's got much warmer now. It was around about 13 degrees when they were qualifying this morning. It is now 4 or 5 degrees warmer than that. Still pretty breezy, but a nice warm wind now. So they've had 2 qualifying sessions. One yesterday and one today, this morning, a couple of hours ago. And what's happened this weekend is that the sessions have been reversed, if you like. So qualifying 1 actually set the grid for race 2 to come tomorrow. And the qualifying session from a few hours ago is the one that sets the grid for this first race. And it will see Max Futrell, the RACE GP team, taking the pole position, not just in this race, but he's going to be on pole position for the race tomorrow as well. So waiting for the cars, as you can see on the left of your screen there, to make their way out of the pit lane. Some of them already making their way onto the grid. There you can see the mountains in the background here. You couldn't see them yesterday. It was pretty heavy cloud, pretty heavy rain at times. but much better conditions. But that's been a bit of a headache for the drivers and teams, because every time they've gone out, it's been different conditions for them to try and tackle. So Formula Renault, founded all the way back in 1971. This is going to be the 28th season of this longest running single-seater championship, and many, many famous names have come through the ranks of Formula Renault, including current Formula 1 world champions like Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen, all raced in Formula Renault. And the vast majority of drivers that come through into Formula 1 have all, at one time or another, as they climb the ranks, come through the Formula Renault Championship. We have got a talented field of young drivers, many of them just 17 or 18 years of age. There's 8 different teams competing in the championship this year, 13 rookies, 14 drivers coming back for their second season, all of them very much hoping to improve upon the last and go for the championship. As I said, 9 of the circuits this year also hosting Formula 1, so this is great training for these young drivers to be able to get up the ranks, get used to racing around these Grand Prix tracks. 20 races across the course of the season, 2 at every race meeting, and as I said, a slightly longer race duration, apart from at Monaco, where we'll have 30 minutes plus 1 lap. So the drivers are going to line up onto the grid with Max Futrell having recorded a time of 2 minutes 2.456 seconds to get pole position, ahead of the American Logan Sargent, who was the best part of half a second slower. Logan with a 2:02.908, his teammate at the RACE GP squad. So it's the Briton on pole position, the American alongside. The American Logan Sargent, one of the rookies that's come up into the championship for the first time this year. But a very rapid driver, and proving to be very competitive, racing in the UK last year, where he was one of the front runners in the British Formula 4 Championship, finishing in 3rd place and a race winner there, and on the podium as well. Max Futrell, somebody else that came up through British Formula 4 a couple of years ago, but this is his now 2nd season in the Renault Eurocup. He finished 6th in the championship last year and was the rookie champion there in the number 1 car on pole position. He's just 18 years of age, comes from Birmingham in the Midlands in the UK, and will be looking to build upon the 1 race victory that he picked up last year. That was a victory at the Red Bull Ring at Spielberg. In fact, it was his only podium finish last year, but he did take 5 4th place finishes. He competed last year with the Tech 1 racing team, but has moved across this year to RACE GP. So Max Futrell on pole position by a handsome margin, but the number 2 car there, Logan Sargent, is, as I say, the driver that was going to line up alongside him for this first race of the weekend. 17 years of age, from Florida, and 3rd in last year's British F4 Championship, which was his first real full season of single-seater racing. He's another former world karting champion, and there are many of those on the grid, many of the drivers on the grid having won either junior or senior titles in world and European karting. So that's the front row of the grid. Victor Martin is going to be lining up 3rd on the grid. He is in the number 4 car. His time was a 2 minute 2.7. The way the qualifying session worked is that everybody was split into 2 groups. The groups depended on how they'd gone in the practice sessions. So we didn't have all 27 cars on the track at the same time. They were split into 2 groups to give them room to qualify. It was a 30-minute session, and each group had 15 minutes of qualifying. The fastest driver from the fastest group gets pole position, so that's Max Futrell. The fastest driver from the second group gets 2nd on the grid, and then it runs down in group order. So 2nd fastest in the fastest group actually starts 3rd, and 2nd fastest in the 2nd fastest group starts 4th. So it is not necessarily the starting grid reflective exactly of how quick they were compared to each other, but obviously they work this system. It's a pretty normal system to work when you split into groups, because the conditions can change, and they certainly have been changeable this weekend with the weather. So there, Logan Sargent making an immediate impression starting this race on the front row of the grid. But remember, he did a 2:02.9, and Victor Martin, who's behind him on the grid, 3rd on the grid, was actually a couple of tenths quicker. Martin, one of the French drivers who just missed out on last year's French Formula 4 Championship. Rogier was the driver that beat him at the very last round here at Paul Ricard. And again, Victor Martin is another former Another former driver that has had great success in junior and world karting. There he is in the number 4 car. You'll see that there are 4 drivers and 4 cars on the grid with the traditional heritage yellow and black livery of Renault. Now these are the drivers that have come up and are part now of the Renault Sport Academy. In fact, 4 of this year's Academy drivers all competing in the Renault Eurocup, and they all run the same colour scheme, whether or not they're in the same team. So that's just a way to identify them. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on as we look at Yifei, the driver 4th on the grid, back for his 2nd season in the Formula Renault Eurocup. And Yifei is with the Joseph Kaufmann racing team, who've had great success in recent years. In fact, they're looking to become the first team ever to win 3 drivers' championships on the bounce in the Renault Eurocup. There is another of the Academy drivers, Christian Lundgaard, who is going to be lining up on the 3rd row of the grid, the Danish driver here. The name Lundgaard you may know from the past because he's the son of Henrik Lundgaard, who was a European rally champion, and Christian, no mean driver himself, finishing as the champion last year in the Northern European Zone Formula 4 Championship with 10 wins. He also contested the Spanish F4 Championship and won that. And alongside him on the grid for Arden is Oscar Piastri, somebody who was racing against Logan Sargent last year because they both competed in the British Formula 4 Championship. It was runner-up spot behind Jamie Caroline to Logan Sargent and Oscar Piastri, to 3rd for Logan Sargent, and Oscar Piastri was 2nd in that championship. There is one of 3 Russian drivers that we have in the field this weekend, Alexander Smalley with the Tech Racing team, who is going to be lining up on the 4th row of the grid in the number 22 car as the grid is cleared. And Smalley, one of the younger drivers out there, in fact, just 16 years of age. He won't turn 17 until the summer, and he competed in Formula 4 last year in both the Spanish Championship, where he took 8 wins and was a runner-up, and the Northern European Zone Championship, in which he finished in 3rd place. Alongside him we'll have Lorenzo Colombo, had a much better qualifying session this morning than he had for the first session yesterday, which sets the grid for tomorrow's race. And Lorenzo Colombo for the JD Motorsport team is in the 61 car, and he's going to be completing that 4th row of the grid. So they head off onto the green flag lap here, and a chance for us to take a look at this 5.842 kilometre long circuit, for the drivers to just switch their minds on now and come up with a plan as to what they're going to do at the start of this race. It is a very quick circuit, this. They spend over 70% of the lap on full throttle. When the circuit was originally built and opened in 1970, the back straight, the Mistral straight, was 1.8 kilometres long, as you see the grid on screen. It is still a very long straight, but it's interrupted now by a chicane. That does, though, present one of the best overtaking opportunities on the lap. It's a very flat circuit. Speaking to some of the drivers over the course of the weekend so far, all of them familiar with it, by the way, because there was an official test here over the winter, in which actually, although it was colder, the lap times were much quicker than we've had so far this weekend, up to a second and a half quicker than we had this weekend. And the drivers saying that it's quite difficult to just pick your reference points here because it is so flat, and there are no real natural points to pick your braking points, so your turning in points, no big trees, for example, no big buildings at the side of the track. All those sorts of things that drivers look for to pick the points to hit the brakes and turn into the corners. It's a busy lap for them, 38 gear changes per lap and G-forces of over 2G. The top speed that they'll reach around here down that Mistral straight before they get to the chicane should be over 235 kilometres an hour. So just to rattle through the front end of the grid once again for you. You've seen the graphic on screen, but it's Max Futrell and Logan Sargent on row 1, the British driver, and the American. Row 2 we have Victor Martin, the first of the French drivers, and Yifei Yi, the driver from China for Joseph Kaufmann Racing, 4th on the grid. Christian Lundgaard, the Dane, starting on the inside of row 3 with Oscar Piastri, the Australian. Again, 3 Australians that we have in the field. He's with the Arden team and lining up on the outside of row 3 to complete the top 6. Arden, the British squad, which was co-founded by Christian Horner, who of course has had great success over recent times with the Red Bull Formula 1 racing team. He was a racer himself, got all the way to Formula 3000, which was then the feeder series to Formula 1. We set up this team with his father Gary when he the history of the Arden Racing team. Tech One Racing have Alexander Smalley, and JD Motorsport have Lorenzo Colombo to complete the 4th row and the 5th row. Another Joseph Kaufman Racing driver, Richard Verschoor, who was backed by the Red Bull Junior programme last year. He struggled with the car yesterday, he was telling me. In fact, he felt like he may have had a slow puncture. It wasn't, it was just a very understeery car. So he's a bit further down the grid for tomorrow's race, but he had a better session here today. So he's going to be 9th on the grid and 10th on the grid. Neil Verhagen, who is backed by Red Bull, and that is the US driver who completes the top 10, Neil Verhagen, who is competing again with the Tech One Racing squad and has had a pretty meteoric rise up through the ranks. Watch for Yiffy. He had a very good run here last year. He's never won in Formula Renault Eurocup. He finished 8th in the championship last year, 3rd in the rookie standings, but he got 3 podiums, and his best ever finish so far came here at this circuit. Watch also for Max Deforny coming through in the 33 car for MP Motorsport from the 7th row of the grid. He was one of the winners here last year, as was Sasha Fernastres, who has now moved on to compete in European Formula 3, but was the winner of last year's championship for Joseph Kaufman Racing. So the RHGP team and the Joseph Kaufman team both having a race win at the event last year. Okay, all the build-up is complete, and we are getting ready. There's a message coming up on the timing screen to say we're going to get an extra formation lap. So there you go. It's just confirmed for you on the TV pictures as well. So they're going to give them an extra formation lap. I don't know why, but that is what is happening. So having built the adrenaline up and got ready to go racing, they're now going to have a slow run around this 5.8 kilometre circuit once again. The race distance, when they complete all the laps, should be somewhere just under 90 kilometres. And then if you're looking for quick lap times, and I say it's been a bit mixed in terms of the speed of the cars this weekend, but if you're looking for quick lap times, the very best lap around here, qualifying conditions, set by Yi last year, it was a 2:09. The circuit lap record from race set by Lando Norris, the winner of the championship 2 years ago, competing in Formula 2 this year, and McLaren protege, and the 2016 championship winner has the lap record of 2 minutes 5.627 seconds. With the conditions being dry and sunny, we should be dipping beneath that. And for those of you new to the Formula Renault Eurocup, just a word on the cars. They are 2-litre single-seaters, producing around about 210 brake horsepower, but remember the cars are very light, so the power-to-weight ratio is getting on for 40% more than that. They have sequential gearboxes with a paddle shift. It's a 7-speed gearbox, and the engine is a 2-litre Clio engine, relating that to Renault, and the huge investment that they put into young driver development and racing cars have been doing with this championship since the early 1970s. They also really work hard to make sure there's great parity in the field. So as soon as the cars come back for any competitive session within the outer paddock, which we have here at Paul Ricard, there is a big awning set up for the technical team, the scrutineers, and the cars, some of them selected cars, are brought back into there and scrupulously checked. There's a real emphasis put on the championship, put on the cars in terms of making sure the engines are level, making sure all the cars are the same and stick within these strict technical regulations that we have. Of course, teams and drivers can work to try and gain advantage in the setup of the cars, but the basic engineering is a very level playing field, which is so important for these drivers, all looking to build their careers and make a name for themselves, to feel that they come into the championship with an equal chance of winning compared to anyone else. Points, the FIA point system awarded for the races, just to say as well, it's the top 10 that will score points. So the FIA standard point system, as you see in Formula 1, 25 points for a win, 18 for second, 15 for third. Great to see the Renault colours there with the scholarship drivers, 3 of them near the front of the grid. These drivers all backed in terms of not just the sort of technical development they get in the Formula 1 simulator. They get to go to Formula 1 tests, they get to be around the world of Formula 1. Renault really do help support them, fitness training, media training, and it's one of those drivers, Max Futrell, that lines up on the front row of the grid. Another, Victor Martin, is right behind him, and another one, Christian Lundgaard, right behind him. So 3 of them together there, 1st, 3rd and 5th on the grid. Number 1, Max Futrell with a green helmet on pole position. And a good start, he said, but I know there's a long, long way to go in this championship. Can Logan Sargent get a podium on his debut in the Formula Renault Eurocup? We're about to see how he gets on, as this time we should be ready to go racing. 30 minutes plus 1 lap here at Paul Ricard. Ready for the start of the race. The green flag is waved at the back of the grid. The red lights come on. They go out. We go racing. And it's a fabulous start for Logan Sargent. A terrible start for row 2 for Victor Martin. Almost stopped off the line. And Christian Lundgaard had to sprint out to avoid him. So the pole position man, Max Futrell, is going to drop back into second place. It's Logan Sargent who leads on his debut here at Paul Ricard. Futrell, the pole sitter, back down to second place. Third for Yves, the driver who started on the outside of row 2. So he moved up into third spot as well. Christian Lundgaard, despite that scary moment, making a decent start. He's just there in fourth place. Oscar Piastri just behind in fifth, but leaving the door open here. There's all sorts of carnage going on in the background. Drivers running out wide. Luckily, no grumble traps here at the circuit, just these striped runoff areas, so they'll be able to rejoin, lose time, but carry on. So others losing out at the start of the race as well, dropping down the order out of the top 10. But everybody, I think, surviving the race. But it was a bad start for Martin, and he now needs to try and come up from the midfield. In the background there, the green and white colours, some of the Australian drivers, Thomas Maxwell, who went quick in yesterday's qualifying session, but he's a lot further down the grid for this one. He's in the 62 car, trying to come from the 10th row of the grid, so he might be one to watch coming through. There he is with the white and green flashes on the car. Thomas and the JD Motorsport team, and it seems everybody there still running. Terrific start then for Logan Sargent, who's already built up a 1 second cushion as we approach the end of this first lap of the race. Very good, look like he's made up a couple of spots as well, which will be the Red Bull liveried car. Martin's dropped to 14th place in the end, so he lost 10 places. No, 12 places off the start from second on the grid, but at least he kept it going, and happily nobody ran into the back of him, because that was quick reactions from Christian Lundgaard to avoid him at the same side of the grid. And as well for Alexander Smalley, overtaking as they come into this final sector, and lots of overtaking opportunities around the entire lap here, really. So some good races here in different categories over the past. We see the 54 car, the white and red car, one of the Andrew Vallis cars. Xavier Loveras trying to work his way through the midfield. At the end of lap 1, it's Sargent that leads by 1.1 seconds. Battles in the background. Is there going to be a change of position? Yes, that's a good move at the inside there for Charles Milesi, the number 3 car, one of the RSGP cars, teammate to Logan Sargent. There leaves the Australian Thomas Maxwell, the 62 car, trying to work his way up through the field as well. Should be able to, if it goes well as it did yesterday in the session, he was 4th in his group in qualifying. Should be able to work through, but they want to do it quickly. They're very evenly matched around here. Sargent leading, Futrell in second place. He in third. We moved up off the start. Lundgaard, that scary moment, running 4th at the end of the first lap of the race. We've already got, I'm afraid, one into the pits with dramas. Let's see what the cause of that was, but we'll then get the car back out and use this as a test session, but effectively it's going to be the end of the race. It's Max de Forney who's dropped to the tail of the field, the 33 car, who will come into this as a second season driver, hopeful of being a real championship contender. In fact, he's had a few seasons in the Formula Renault Eurocup, now the Belgian driver. But we've also got into the pits, I'm afraid, the number 12, Joseph Kaufman Racing car of Richard for sure, and Richard is out of the car. So when right at the start of the race, the car there's any damage to it, so whether it's something under the skin, that car has come into the pits as well. So they're the top 3, just equidistant, but 4th and 5th is probably the battle to keep an eye on now. 4th place with Colombo there, Lorenzo Colombo hanging, Lundgaard and Colombo working together, Colombo hanging on to the tail of Christian Lundgaard and closing up a little bit at the start of this lap through the first few sectors. So he's making good ground. Fastest first sector of the race going to the race leader, but the fastest second sector has gone to Max Futrell. So if he can keep that up, Max might try to begin to close this gap now. There is the car, oh, the man I was talking about in the pits. We get a restart of that. Very slow getaway for Martin. Everybody doing a super job to avoid him. Fantastic reactions there, wasn't it, from Christian Lundgaard? It could have been very, very messy indeed. You have to trust that the guy in front is going to get off the line well. You can't wait, you can't give them a gap, you've got to go for it. And he did just that, but he had to swerve left to avoid the contact. So he lost 2 potential points finishes here, as you see them fanning across there in the midfield, dropping down the order. 2 of the academy cars involved in that. I think it was Rougier starting back in the 8th row of the grid for this one. And indeed, Max did put a good third sector together as well. So he's now got the fastest lap of the race, still a couple of seconds away from what they were doing in the qualifying session this morning, but he's got that gap down to 0.8 of a second. So if he does a similar lap time and brings the gap down by a similar distance, he'll be on the gearbox of the race leader come the end of this lap. So there is Max Futrell pushing on hard now. Lap time last time around at 2:04.0, 3/10 quicker than the race leader and 4/10 quicker than Yi in 3rd place. He was caught a little bit by Colombo into that 4th place now, ahead of Lundgaard, fending off Lundgaard for the last lap and a half or so. Piastri is next up in 6th place, Verhagen still 7th, Smalley, Milesi and Vartanyan, the other Russian driver, rounding out the top 10 positions at the moment. So Vartanyan making a decent start to the race to get himself at the moment into the final points paying position. Rougier is in the pits, I'm afraid, in the number 87 car. So disappointing qualifying session for him this morning. Couldn't quite hook the laps together, and out of the race already for him. We've already lost as well. Deforne, Alex Peroni we lost. That was a car we saw earlier on. We have lost, who just wasn't able to hook up a lap in yesterday's qualifying session. We're better in this one, but out already. So the cars weaving their way around this 5.8 kilometre long lap, and there you can see the gap from 1st to 2nd virtually down to nothing. This is the battle for 4th place between Colombo and Lundgaard. And Lundgaard starting to come back at Colombo now, and a little bit quicker on this lap, getting into slipstream further back. Battles going on as well here too with number 4, the other car is running in the academy colours. Martin trying to come back through the order. That's the one you're looking at now. And his next target, the 63 car, is going to be Najib Razak, the Malaysian driver. So those two working their way through in the midfield. Well, not midfield, that's just outside the top 10. Najib Razak running at the moment. Just outside the top 10, 12th and 13th, those two drivers. So here's the gap from 1st to 2nd. There's Yi coming after them as well. 3rd place looks like he's on a good lap here. Futrell set a couple of fastest laps now, starting to come onto the tail. And battles further back. Getting involved in that one is Thomas Neubauer there, the black and sort of luminous orange number 23 car. He's getting involved in that battle as well now for 12th place. So he's already lost one, and Malaysian driver now loses another place there. As you see, Najib Razak losing 2 places in quick succession. Not really a surprise that Martin was able to come through quickly, given how much quicker he was in the qualifying session. So Martin edging up back towards the points now. I think his next target is going to be Thomas Maxwell for 11th place. And if he can dispose of him quickly, he'll then start to go after the points paying positions. Logan Sargent, the race leader, coming out of the final turn, then was to take in 2nd gear, accelerating up towards this chicane now. It's changed slightly the shape of this first chicane. Slightly different lines can be taken in here than in previous years. It's a 4th gear chicane, a left and a right, the second part of it. You are planning on taking that absolutely flat out. You bury the throttle here and run up the gears again to around about 140 down this first short straight before you go down to 3rd gear, and then this tight sequence of corners. A lock up there on the front right for the race leader. He's pushing hard to keep Futrell behind him. As you can see, he got the fastest lap of the race last time around at 2:03.582, and that was in response to the couple of quicker laps that Max Futrell had in the previous laps. And on this first sector, Futrell is fighting back, only slightly quicker, 0.08 of a second quicker, but Futrell at the start of this lap coming back, and that lock-up might have helped Logan Sargent try and restrict costs. One of the measures that the championship put in place is that there's a restriction on 2 sets of tyres for both qualifying and both races. There's an incident involving car 52, message on the screen, which is which is being investigated after the race. That's for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, but the stewards are going to look at that at the end of the race. If Yi has put in a personal best lap time last time around, but just fell away a little bit from the top two. There you can see, coming under a bit of pressure here is the blue and white Raul Guzman car, the Mexican driver here, and possibly about to lose a place. Now he digs his heels in and clings onto the inside line here. So Guzman there, and the number 85 car hanging on to 15th place, coming on a real attack from Loverass, who's this driver under investigation. So lots of scraps here in the midfield outside of the points. The graphic there you can see who's gained and lost the most places. Of course, Martin, the one that lost the most places off the line, 12th place currently, and closing in though on Thomas Maxwell ahead of him. So the number 4 car catching up to the Australian Maxwell, JD Motorsport driving the 62 car. The 2 leaders go over the line again. The gap is just under 0.4 of a second. We can see Futrell glancing now and showing his nose in the mirrors as they hit the brakes and go through the first of the chicanes here at Paul Ricard. 17.5 minutes left to go in the race. Has got plenty of time to find a way through. This is a very impressive drive indeed from Logan Sargent, the youngster from Florida. More slipstreaming going on further down the field. Close racing here, and it involves one car running off wide. You can see that it is very possible to gain an advantage if you're not careful, if you run off the circuit. 53 was the one having the go, which was Alicio Martinez, who has come up from the Spanish karting championship, which has been a runner-up for the last 2 years running. So he's a newcomer to the championship, but looking pretty racy so far. And they're all fighting for positions that are not necessarily going to give them points, but just to show each other, because lots of these drivers haven't raced each other until this year, what they're capable of, and not to give an inch, and to show that they're not going to be a pushover this season. So some good wheel-to-wheel racing going on here. They're coming out of the 3rd gear chicane, which breaks up this long Mistral straight to leaders. And then we've got one of the Tech 1 racing cars. It's Thomas Neubauer, Thomas's teammate Frank Bird, the British driver, coming in this season. Lost his wing, or it became dislodged when he hit a marker in the qualifying session early on, so he had to start at the back of the grid because he lost the front wing fairly early on in the session. It was towards the end of the session that people were putting in the quicker lap times. 16 minutes plus 1 lap to go in the race. The gap from first to second was 0.7 of a second over the line, but as you saw when they started to go through that first chicane, it already was coming down. So Sargent from Futrell, Yee in 3rd place, Colombo still in 4th, but still just under a second clear of Lundgaard in 5th. Oscar Piastri, another debutant, doing very well, the Australian, in 6th place for Arden. Neil Verhagen still 7th, Alexander Smalley still in 8th, Milesi 9th, and Vartanian still in 10th place. He's only 0.9 of a second clear of Maxwell, who is 1.8 seconds clear of the recovering Victor Martin. The number 4 scholarship car, academy car rather. This midfield battle continuing as they head over the line, absolutely side by side here. Who's going to come out best in this one? Will be Loverass or not? Running absolutely wheel to wheel. The yellow wing mirrors though hanging on to the position there. Just about, in fact there are 3 of them together now, all bunched each other up. That's the problem, when you start racing one another then you allow the others behind to catch up. Getting stuck in there in the number 11 car at the head of that group is Clement Novolac, who's coming into the championship for the first time and hits the brakes, gets back on the line and gets to the head of that little group. So this is the battle for 16th place. Novolac getting through just about. Also involved in that scrap, you've got Martinez, Loveraz, Sami Taufik as well, the Moroccan driver, who is running in the number 43 car, as you saw, battling away at the front of the field there, front of the group there. Raul Guzman, the Mexican, trying to make a move at the inside, which he does under braking. Careful not to run wide on the exit and give the place back, but he gets a tidy exit, gets it back on the line, and Guzman gaining a place there to move potentially up in the 14th place that's going to be. But of course now you give a toe, not much elevation change here, but this is the one bit of undulation you get on the circuit, on the climb up towards the end of the Mistral straight, and there has to be careful. It's taken flat out in the dry, that corner, but Guzman was able to keep the position just about, so good bit of driving there by him, battling in the top half of this extensive 27 car field. 23 cars remaining because we lost 4. Logan Sargent sending the fastest lap of the race, now a low 203.2 last time around, quicker than anybody else so far in the race during the first sector. second, so don't get too despondent if you're a fan of Max Futrell. He's still very much in the shadows, as you can see there, of the race leader. Logan Sargent, the RACE GP team, leading the way. Max Futrell, despite the different colour scheme, he's a teammate too, Logan, so those two pushing each other hard. They are round about 2 seconds clear now of Yi in third place, the Joseph Campbell racing driver. Colombo is matching Yi's pace in fourth position, but not really closing the gap to him. Oh, picking up the marker boards there. That is the 43 car in that mid-scrap that we've been looking at. Sami Taufik, the Moroccan driver, just running wide, hitting a marker. And be careful, because remember I said Frank Bird did that in qualifying and ended up dislodging the front wing. Here is a replay, just understeering, back end twitchy, runs over it, and that is not going to be good news for the front of the car, I'm afraid. So it's going to hold him up somewhat. Gap between the first two seems pretty stable on this lap. The tyres last. The drivers were telling me about this morning and saying, do they last? Do they keep going? Because I noticed in the qualifying sessions, the lap times got quicker and quicker and quicker. Part of that yesterday was because we'd had a wet practice session. The track was quite green and it was just naturally getting grippier. But they do get quicker and quicker, and they don't drop off very rapidly either. So the Michelin tyres, which the drivers all use, these slick tyres, which they're restricted to 2 sets per weekend for the competitive sessions, will give some good lap times here as Victor Martin. You're still getting close there to the tail of Thomas Maxwell, who ran a bit wide. And we see them again. I wouldn't be surprised if they are the other way around in that battle. All battles going on still in this midfield here. Everybody fighting for every scrap of position. And Maxwell there did manage to stay ahead of Martin, so he is still clinging on to 11th place. But even if Victor Martin can get past him quickly, it's quite a big gap now has developed to the next car ahead in 10th position, which is Vartanyan, the Russian driver for Arden. So he's got to dispatch quickly here of Thomas Maxwell, but of course the higher up the field you get, the more difficult it becomes to carve your way through. What can Martin do here? He's a bit too far back, I think, to try and pick up the toe, or is he? Because there are very long straights here. Well, he starts to weave around. He never really was serious about having a go there. He's just trying to put the driver ahead off his stride, trying to make Thomas Maxwell make an error here under braking on the way into the corner, but it didn't work. So Martin, the 16-year-old from Varennes-Jarcy, just outside Paris, pushing on into the pits though, and looking like he'll be out of the race. Sami Taufik, who hit that marker and damaged his front wing. He'll rejoin. The team will get him back out. It's quite a quick fix to get the front wing replaced, the front nose cone, which includes the front wing, replaced. However, effectively, that's his chance. Any chance he's had of getting points effectively gone. So the gap from first to third suddenly creeping out to about 0.8 of a second. There you can see Yi kind of on his own in third. The one thing that has developed over the last few laps is that Colombo in fourth place has managed to edge clear of fifth. Still Thomas Maxwell with his mirrors full here. The 19-year-old from Darwin competed in this championship last year with the best of fifth place, round 2 at Monza, where we go for round 2 this year as well. Racing with the Tech 1 racing team last year was Thomas Maxwell, and this year he's moved across to the JD Motorsport team. Martin got very close at the start of the lap, but having shown his nose, he's just lost a bit of pace. He's just dropped back ever so slightly. Axel Matthews leading a three-way battle here in the 51 car, the purple coloured cars, 20th, 21st and 22nd positions. Monots and Theoctis in that group as well. So towards the tail end of the field, as we see the leaders at the sharp end of the field with less than 10 minutes to go, plus 1 lap now, crossing the line. The gap looks bigger to me. Is it? Yes, it is, because Logan Sargent has set a new fastest lap of the race, 2 minutes 2.9. That was 0.2 quicker than Max Futrell. He's doing a stunning job here on his debut, don't forget. And yes, this is one of the circuits that they've had some testing at, so he'll know the circuit a little bit. It's going to be tough for him this year, though, because having raced in the UK last year, with the exception of Silverstone, he's going to have to learn a lot of the circuits. That said, Silverstone has various different circuit configurations as well, so it's not necessarily going to be a help to him there, because he would have run supporting the British Touring Car Championship last year on the shortest version of the Silverstone circuit, the national circuit. So make the most of the circuits you do know. Of course, they all go on simulators, spend a day training on them. But Logan was pretty confident that he could go quicker in the race and quicker in qualifying. I spoke to him just before qualifying this morning, and he said he never quite got the sectors together yesterday, just little mistakes here and there. so he knew he could go quicker today, and proved to do exactly that in the qualifying session, which set the grid for this race. And he looks very comfortable at the head of the field. Been very impressed with him so far. And now we get a replay of this move from Clement Novolac in the 11 car, trying the move to gain a position on Razak, but didn't quite find a way through in that midfield scraps at the moment. It looks like he will stay in 16th place in his first car race this for Novolac, because he has come from the world of karting as well, as they all do. British driver, sorry, first season in the Renault Eurocup. He's come from a very strong karting pedigree, Masters World Karting Champion of last year. He has done some racing in cars, because like some of them do, they go to New Zealand over the winter and race in the Toyota Racing Series. He actually was a race winner in that, impressively. His first proper go at car racing, finishing in 5th place in the Toyota Racing Series. That's Clement Novolac, the British driver, just 17 years of age. So this is what is becoming a probably increasingly frustrated number 4, Victor Martin, trying to find his way past Thomas Maxwell for 11th place. And the longer this goes on, the further into the distance gets the 10th place car, which holds on to the last of the points. There's the gap, you can see it. Quite a big gap, the 42 car, which is holding on to the 10th position, and the last of the points is Alexander Vartanyan, and he is over a second clear now of this scrap for 11th place. The car about to rejoin is one of the Renault Sport Academy liveried cars. So it could be Rougier coming back out of the pits. 2:02.8 seconds. Fastest lap of the race, the last lap of the race for Logan Sargent. So for the first time in the race, really, the gap is over a second now. It's 1.2 seconds. Back to Max Futrell in 2nd place. Here's this scrap further back with Axel Mathius in the purple and white car, which is one of the Adrian Valles run cars. Adrian, who was front runner in the World Series by Renault, runner-up to Robert Kubica before he went on to become a Formula 1 test driver. Set up a few years ago a team and came straight into Renault, and Adrian Valles, the AVF team, that's one of his drivers in that purple liveried car. Axel Mathius from Mexico, and he is giving a big old toe down the straight to the 2 cars behind him. It looks like they'll run deep into that corner, so it comes back on itself, but he's actually managed to stretch his legs and pull away ever so slightly, I would say, from the 2 cars that were trying to have a go at him. So Mathius hanging on at the moment to the position. That's 20th place. Manotz and Tsiotis. Manotz number 84, 84. Tsiotis just behind him. Tsiotis, another of the Russian drivers in the black liveried car there, that's come up into the championship for the first time this season. Racing in Formula 4 last year in the Northern European Zone Championship, which was a top 10 finisher. Cars over the line, 5 minutes and change remain. Gap from first to second, out by another 2/10 to 1.4 seconds. 2:02.9 for the leader, a 2:03.1 for Futrell in 2nd place, a 2:03.1 as well for Yi in 3rd. So although the gap is still pretty big at 2.9 seconds from 2nd to 3rd, Max Futrell's got to remain focused here. Even if the leader's getting away, there's a job to do to fend off the Chinese driver for that 2nd spot. Yeah, looking to repeat the podium finish that he picked up here at the circuit last year. It doesn't look like it's going to be the 2nd place that he managed 12 months ago. However, he's doing a very good job. He's having to, because Colombo in 4th place is less than a second behind him. So still potentially a tense few final minutes of the race coming up for some drivers here. As we go a bit further down the order again to look at some of the many scraps that are going on. Clement Novolac pushing hard in the 11 car to try and find a way through. Currently at the moment running in 16th place, just ahead of him is the Razak in the 63 car in 15th position, and this is Thomas Maxwell still managing to fend off Victor Martin, starting his single-seater career in Formula Ford cars. He was 4th in the Australian Formula Ford Championship, Thomas Maxwell, back in 2015. And then he came to the UK and raced in Formula 3 in 2016, in which he finished in 7th place with Sean Walkinshaw's team. Sean, the son of the late great Tom Walkinshaw, Lost the man behind the silk cut Jaguars, had such success at Le Mans. There is the Red Bull liveried car of Neil Verhagen, the American driver, running in 7th place, but with the Russian Alexander Smalley only a few tenths of a second behind him. And this still that scrap for 11th place between Maxwell and Martin. And the longer it goes on, the more it looks like Martin is just running out of steam and running out of ideas. Neil is so frustrated after a very strong qualifying session that he fluffed the start. Not easy to get these cars off the line though, and you're talking fractions of a second between a good start and a terrible start. The team's looking on and worked relentlessly through the course of the weekend to get these cars as in tip-top shape as they can. Into Martin trying to find a way through again, another former world karting champion. Second in the French Formula 4 Championship with 4 race wins last year. Coming into the Renault Eurocup, you can see why he's been one of the drivers backed by the Renault Sport Academy, having gone so well in qualifying. But he's done well to come back and gain some places back. Oh, and the door opens up, he goes down the inside of Maxwell. There's almost contact between the two of them, but Maxwell keeps his foot in, and the Australian stays ahead. So holds on for the time being to 11th place. Another incident is being investigated after the race for a breach of starting procedures. That's 42, which is Alexander Vartanian. There, the replay of that very close move. Suddenly, it looked like the sort of opportunities were disappearing, but suddenly the door opened up and he was in without hesitation, but he couldn't quite find a way through. So remains in 12th place. There, the big gap from first to second. Second to third, what's that gap? It's come to 3.1 seconds. Come down by a few fractions, that's all though. They're lapping within a few hundredths of a second of each other. And this is the battle for 6th place then. So the Australian Oscar Piastri coming under more and more pressure now from Neil Verhagen in the Red Bull liveried car. Verhagen, who is number 21, racing for the Tech 1 racing team, has closed that gap down, but he's got to be careful because just behind him he's got Alexander Smalley, his teammate, different livery to the car, but teammates they are. This is number 24, another Tech 1 car, Frank Bird, the black and red car gaining a place there at the end of the Mistral straight to slot through. So that was a good move, but it's only for 18th place. So scraps going on in the closing stages of this race, predominantly. I think for 6th place is probably the one to watch. There is 6th, Oscar Piastri, the Australian driver. Had such a good season in British Formula 4 last year. Jamie Caroline with a record number of wins. Sort of dominated the championship, certainly dominated the first half of the year, but Oscar actually really came back at him at the second half of the year and showed what a good driver he is. And the other scrap to watch is this one for 3rd place. I haven't talked too much about the driver in 4th place. Had a good start, Lorenzo Colombo. He's Italian, 17 years of age, and 3rd in the Italian F4 Championship last year with a couple of wins and 8 podium finishes. That was his 2nd season of car racing. He raced in Formula 4 the year before that as well in 2015. He was karting in the Italian Championship, so he's pushing on for the final spot on the podium. Still this battle going on for 11th place. Still further back, we've got this battle going on for, what, 20th place between Mathieu's, number 51. His teammate Menot's just behind him. And Ziotis, the Russian, who's dropped back a little bit now. So ferocious stuff. And it shows just how close and competitive it is. Even back in 20th place, there's a very high calibre of driving. These are all drivers that have been successful in the lower formula coming into Renault Eurocup or in karting. So the entire field is massively competitive. Just because you're out of the points and out of the top 10 does not mean you're not a quick driver. And pretty much any of these drivers, you could put them near the front of the grid and they'd probably be able to hang on and score some points. But it's so important to get a good qualifying session when they are so evenly matched when it comes to the race. And a good start, of course, as well. So there, the number 61 car trying to close up and gain a position. The red and white machine is Lorenzo Colombo, the Italian I've been talking about. Can he find a way through? And Yifi Yi, the Chinese driver there with the yellow wing mirrors, the red and white car. This is the battle for the final place on the podium. The time is out now, so we're on to +1 lap, so it's 30 minutes gone. And this is going to be going into the closing stages of the race, the final lap. Starting it, Logan Sargent as the leader, looking to win on his debut. Max Futrell in 2nd place. And this battle for 3rd, 4th, and potentially 5th as well. Christian Lundgaard is not far back if they start to hold each other up. Here we get a replay of the number 24 car of Frank Bird, missing the sweet spot, running off the road and having to work his way through the markers. So frustrating race so far for Frank, the 18-year-old from Britain from Northampton, grew up and was born in Cumbria, but from Northampton these days. And this battle for serious points, 6th, 7th and 8th, all running line astern here, but Piastri has done well the last couple of laps to just edge back away from Neil Verhagen, the American driver there. This Red Bull Junior backing that he's got, and Verhagen proving to be a very successful driver. We see more battles for this 20th spot, and still Axel Mathias is hanging on to the place, but you now got coming at them Vladimir Dziotis in the 84 car, who splits them. He gets in between them, he's got the inside line, and he gains a place. That's up to 21st position for him. He's worked hard to get to that place, and finally he manages to come through. But one of the leaders almost home and dry is Logan Sargent, in which is going to be a race to remember for him. How's he going to follow this for the rest of the season, winning on his debut? But he hasn't just won, he has looked in complete control. He had a beautiful start to the race, and he had some pressure from Max Futrell a few laps in, and then he just responded, started to put fastest lap times in, and really the last 5 or 6 minutes of the race he has just stretched his legs and pulled away. It's not a huge amount in front, but nearly 2 seconds. And you can see the checkered flag, and the opening round of the 2018 Formula Renault Eurocup goes to Logan Sargent for the USA. He takes the victory for the R-Ace GP team by just under 2 seconds from the pole sitter Max Futrell. What about third? It's going to be close. It's almost a dead heat over the line in the background, but it's Yi that holds on to the place by just a 1/10 of a second from Colombo. So the Joseph Kaufman squad get a driver on the podium. It's Piastri there just fending them off in that battle for 5th place as well. And in the battle for 11th, sadly just out of the points, Thomas Maxwell, with his mirrors full for most of that race of the number 4 car of Victor Martins, was able to hang on. So Logan Sargent wins by 1.9 seconds from Max Futrell. Yiffy Yi rounding out the podium. He was under real scrutiny from Lorenzo Colombo for the last couple of laps, but in the end held on to the final podium spot by 1/10 of a second. And then Christian Lundgaard coming home in 5th place. Oscar Piastri with a really good drive to hold on to 6th, because just 3/10 of a second behind him over the line was Neil Verhagen, and just 3/10 behind him was Alexander Smalley in 8th place. So the Arden driver fending off the 2 Tech 1 Racing drivers. Then we had Charles Alesi coming home in 9th place, and the final points scorer provisionally, Alexander Vartanyan in 10th place. Maxwell 11th, Martin in 12th place, Thomas Nubauer in 13th, Raul Guzman in 14th, and then Razak 15th, Novolac in 16th, Martinez in 17th, Bird in 18th, Loveras in 19th, Mathieu 20th, Shortis 21st, Munot's 22nd, Taufik 23rd, and we lost Rougier 5 laps behind in the end. Verschoor, Peroni and De Forny were all out of the race early. So a very confident and impressive drive from Logan Sargent in this opening round of the 2018 Formula Renault Eurocup. There you can see confirmation of the provisional results off the screen, and look at the mixture of different nationalities as well. An American, a Brit and a Chinese driver in the top 3, then an Italian, then a Dane, then an Australian. So it is truly an international championship this. At the foot of that graphic you can see that Logan Sargent got the fastest lap of the race. He was trading fastest laps for a while with Max Futrell, but in the end got down to a 2:02.8, which becomes a lap record, and it was only about half a second slower than they were managing to go in the qualifying sessions. So terrific job done there by the team to get their man home in 1st place. And it's a 1-2 for the R-Ace GP squad as well, which they'll be utterly delighted with, no doubt. The R-Ace GP squad with 2 drivers in the top 3, Joseph Kaufman team bringing home the 3rd place in the podium. We're going to look back while we wait for the drivers to come for some highlights now of the race. The drivers on the grid, then off the line, some fierce battles going on throughout the course of the race. And 1 or 2 drivers coming into the pits much earlier than they had anticipated. But at the end of it all, it was Logan Sargent who takes first blood and the maximum 25 points.